So, is REIT financing an anachronism? Over the past few years, REIT financing has come under criticism, some warranted and some not so much. There have been people who have claimed that sale-leaseback financing for skilled nursing facilities just doesn't work anymore. As a matter of fact, I was at lunch a few weeks ago with a health practice leader of a large accounting and consulting firm who said as much. I argued with him that it is not so much the sale-leaseback structure itself as it is the high per-bed prices that are paid and the reality that in most cases they are paying the full going concern price but are technically buying just the real estate. The annual escalators are another matter, so why don't I just deal with them now? The problem that people keep ignoring is that we have been in a peculiar time these past few years. In more normal times, in a typical transaction with 1.5 times EBITDA lease coverage, I know that is the old typical, but it should be the always typical, if not higher. If EBITDA grew by 2% annually, and you had 3% annual escalators, 5 years down the road, the lease coverage would still be a healthy 1.45 times. No problem. And providers would normally assume a higher EBITDA growth rate than just 2%. But as we know, EBITDA for many tenants has not been growing by 2% annually. In fact, it has either not been growing at all or declining for many. Blame Medicare Advantage plans, blame home health care, blame faster recoveries from orthopedic procedures, blame the slowdown in the 80-plus population these past few years, blame anyone you want. But if there is no growth in cash flow for several years, yes, the escalators will kill you. They will especially kill you if the original lease was based on a very high per-bed price and tighter coverage than a traditional 1.5 times. But most providers believe that in the long term, cash flow will be growing again. If not, why would they be in the business? So, what are the benefits of refinancing? First of all, they are long-term partners, normally in the 10 to 15-year range, but often longer if everything works out. There is a reason they have all those renewal options. Second, they can do a lot for you. They can provide acquisition financing, renovation and expansion financing, almost any kind of financing you want. Yes, there is always a cost, but when is there not a cost to access capital? REITs have a lot of flexibility in how they structure their financings, and they will listen to you. There's a reason why some providers keep going back to the same REIT. Why sell when you can just borrow, you might ask? That is always an option and sometimes the best option. You may not believe this, but going back 30 plus years when the healthcare REITs were really getting active, their mantra was, you are in the skilled nursing operating business, not the real estate business. Let us own the real estate and you can focus on the operations. In some ways, they were way ahead of themselves because 30 years ago, the operations were much less complicated than they are today. Back then, you made your money on long-term stay private pay patients and a relatively small Medicare population. And in some states, you even made money on Medicaid. Sounds quaint, doesn't it? Now, the focus on operations has never been more important, and their mantra has more meaning. One of the reasons for not doing sale-leaseback financing, of course, is that you lose control of your real estate. This is true, and as we have seen in the past year or two, tenants have either been removed from their properties by their REIT landlords, or the REIT has sold the buildings with or without the lease remaining in place. That is definitely a risk. But it is a risk because of underperformance. If you are doing a decent job, no problem. If you run into difficulties, the REITs have to take a measured view as to whether there will be some light at the end of the tunnel. And if not, they really have no choice. Yes, you say, but if they will take a write-off by leasing it to another provider at a lower lease rate, why not do the same for me? That will depend on each situation. But if they do it for one, then everyone will be next in line for the same treatment, and the REITs have to worry about their returns for their shareholders. And appearances do matter. I haven't talked about the RIDEA structures yet, and they have definitely grown in popularity. And why not? You sell your real estate at a going concern price, you stay in as manager, and in the REIT joint venture structure, you have some skin in the game for the upside. It may just be the skin of your forearm, but you have some incentive to outperform, especially if the management contract provides for additional payments. REIT investors always preferred the sale-leaseback structure because there was a guaranteed increase in rents, the escalators, which meant there was an almost guaranteed increase in the dividend payout. The reason why they didn't like the idea so much was because of the possible variation in cash flow each year, unlike with leases and their steady increases. RIDEA deals really gained traction after the Great Recession, when, buying senior living communities at the bottom of the market, there was an upside in both the property value and the increasing cash flow of the property, as providers could push rates as the economy strengthened. Their investors bought into that as well, because it made a lot of sense and provided some diversification. Well, something happened on the way to that happy ending. The overbuilding in assisted living and memory care certainly put that goal in the rearview mirror, at least for the time being, and the REIT stocks were punished for it, and for the lease problems, and some of them have not had the typical dividend increases of past years. Life simply got more complicated, as did the operations. So, is REIT financing an anachronism, as some people believe? Hardly. It just has to adapt to the changing times, and if anyone can adapt, it is the REITs. Now, would I recommend anyone selling all their real estate to a REIT and lease it back? No. That takes away any kind of financial flexibility. The capital structure should always have a mix, and, as we have learned the hard way, leverage should never be excessive. REITs help the industry grow, and will do so again. Just don't overpromise and underdeliver. That is when the trouble begins. My thoughts on capital structure will be the subject of another Fireside Chat.